Hey everybody, good evening. Thanks for joining us. We're coming to bring you an update on what is now Tropical Storm Eta in the Caribbean, just south of Cuba. We've been watching this here going into the weekend because this was a very powerful hurricane that went into Central America and packed quite a punch over there for folks in Nicaragua and Honduras. So it has reemerged over the Caribbean, and over the past 24 hours has blossomed back in to this tropical storm that we are watching here for a pretty close approach to the peninsula of Florida. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the forecast. That's to be expected with these late season storms. So really not much of a surprise there, but it does pose a problem. We're trying to make some plans going into the Veterans Day holiday and the subsequent weekend, and we got to figure out where this thing is going. So we're going to try to make some sense of that here going into the live update, but wanted to bring you up to speed on what is currently going on. We just had an advisory come out now at about 22 minutes ago, top of the hour, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Now that we're on Eastern Standard Time or Central, wherever you are, we go back an hour, and the advisories don't change because that's on GMT time or Zulu time. So want to show you, Damien is manning the controls back there, by the way, so a shout out to him. Do we have our app up? We do. I want to start with this wider picture of the lower 48 because you can see we got some warnings up in the Pacific Northwest there. Excuse me. So we're expecting blizzard conditions, and if you've been following our storm chaser Aaron Jack, he's going to be having a lot of fun here going into the next 24 hours. He lives for these kinds of storms. But that big blizzard that's happening out on the West Coast is going to play a role or a factor of sorts, the system that's causing that, into some of the steering that we expect from Eta and kind of help us figure out what's going on with the forecast. So that's what's going on with the big picture here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. You notice lots of colorful polygons here on Florida, lots of watches and warnings to talk about. So we'll get to that here in a moment, but just want to show you on our radar here in the app the expanse of this storm. So it's not the most beautiful storm. It doesn't have that very obvious counterclockwise symmetrical look that you would expect with a healthier storm, but it's a tropical storm. It is thriving there in the very warm Caribbean waters, and the banding extends out quite a bit. Last update from the National Hurricane Center told us that those tropical storm force winds extend out over 100 miles from the center of this storm. So that's something to keep in mind. So going to our WSI graphics now, Damien. Guys, I want to show you the path that just came out with this advisory. Not a whole lot going on with the first 3 days. That's because we've got pretty good confidence with the models in the forecast for the first 36 hours or so, and then things go a little bananas, and you'll see when I show you that on the models, the spaghetti plots, the infamous spaghetti plots. So we'll get to that here in a moment, but the current path does take it pretty close to South Florida, and that's why we have all those watches and advisories up for folks there. So going into tomorrow, into the overnight, this will be passing over the island of Cuba. That kind of helps us here because these are very warm waters. There's some healthy shear in the upper atmosphere to help the storm breathe up top. So that's all signs for intensification. But because Eta will have to pass over Cuba, and we've got some mountainous terrain there, that's going to help keep things at bay a little bit. But then the storm will reemerge over the Florida Straits here, that little body of water where the wonderful Florida Keys are. And so it's going to maintain its intensity. We could see the potential for this to become a Category 1 hurricane. That's not out of the cards here just yet, but it's not the official NHC forecast. However, there have been some points mentioned in their discussions that we could see it. Right now, the maximum sustained winds on this storm are 65 miles per hour. Hurricanes begin at 74 miles per hour. So we're not that far. You know, it's a late season storm, so they tend to play by their own rules. We could see an intense storm, tropical storm, on the cusp of that hurricane designation there as it approaches South Florida. So far, that is not in the official NHC forecast, so we're going to go along with what they've got here on the path. Should make a pretty close approach to South Florida, either along the Keys, the upper Keys there, maybe in southern Miami-Dade County, maybe in Collier County by the Everglades. That's not set in stone, but folks in South Florida should expect to get a pretty close pass to the center, and no matter where it makes its close approach over or near Florida, you can expect a lot of rainfall to be coming from this thing. Then, once it passes through there, kind of makes its way back into the Gulf of Mexico, or into the Gulf of Mexico, and rides up the coastline of Florida there. That's when the uncertainty lays in the forecast. So we'll get into that here in a moment. But watches and warnings that are up with ADA right now. We got tropical storm watch for that western tip of Cuba. That might be allowed to expire here. We saw the Cayman Islands had their advisories let up at the 7 p.m. update. So as far as Florida is concerned, I'll zoom in a little closer so you can see here. So South Florida, you're under a hurricane watch, tropical storm warning, because again, there is that small potential to see hurricane conditions once the storm makes its way back into the Florida Straits and does what it's going to do wherever that approaches by the tip of Florida there. North of that, tropical storm watches are in effect for the Space Coast of Florida and up near the Sarasota area and into Cape Coral northwards of there. I'll give you the exact points right here from the advisory. That tropical storm watch is going to go from the Florida coast north of Jupiter Inlet into Brevard, Volusia County line, so that's on the east coast. The west coast of Florida, that's going to go north of Bonita Beach up to Englewood. So those are the areas that are under a tropical storm watch. That means you could expect to see tropical storm conditions going into the next 36 hours. So with that said, let's get right on into what we can expect from the water. Tropical system is going to be kicking up the surf. So storm surge watch is in effect for much of the South Florida coastline here. Not immense storm surge expected from this, 2 to 4 feet, but especially in times of high tide, we know South Florida has trouble with flooding. They've had a lot of rain here over the past week, so we might expect to see some more of that with this storm here going into the next couple of days. Looks like my graphic ran away from me for a moment. Let's bring that back just a second. Let me get that up here. Yeah, so that pale shade of pink is a storm surge watch, and that spans for most of the southern tip of Florida. The big deal with this won't be so much of what you typically expect with storm surge, you know, the ocean going 2 to 4 feet above where it normally meets the land. The dangerous rip currents are going to be a big problem for these areas, the beaches here. It's going to be a pretty big risk to swimmers out there. I know a lot of people when these systems come by, they like to surf and go out and take advantage of the waves, but those rip currents are a very big problem and they are deadly. So that's something folks need to keep in mind as this storm makes its approach, whether it's on land or very nearby South Florida. Yeah, you need to keep that in mind here with our storm surge situation. So now I'll go ahead and show you some of those sea surface temperatures. Very warm out here. So in the Caribbean, we've seen that has been a very good fuel source for the storm because this water is hot. The magic number we look for with temperatures for sea surface temperatures is 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And take a look at this. What we got so far, 90. And so this is very warm. This is bath water. This is what these storms thrive off of. And that's why the storm was able to be such a strong, potent hurricane when it went into Central America. And then as it emerged back into the Caribbean, again, the upper air plays ball. The water's very warm. It was a no-brainer that this thing couldn't re-intensify because it did survive. It didn't get its circulation completely ripped apart by the mountains there in Central America. It made it back over water just in time to kind of continue on. So moving in a little bit closer here, I'll clear these queries so we can see here. I want to show you what those temperatures look like over the Gulf of Mexico now. So you can see that we are in November. Things cool off just a little bit here. We are in the upper 80s though, so it's not a big difference. Again, that magic number being 82, we got plenty of warm water to work with here, especially in the Florida Straits where we're pretty close to that 90-degree mark. So the idea is, again, this storm approaches Cuba, passes over the landmass, and then will reemerge over the Florida Straits as we head into tomorrow, sometime late morning, afternoon hours. And folks in South Florida begin to see conditions deteriorate. It's been pretty rainy there, as you saw on the MyRadar app there. Damien, let's pull that up one more time so we can show the current radar of what's going on there. I'll remove these layers for the watches and warnings so you can see. And yeah, it's been pretty rainy and very heavy tropical downpours with these bands. So the fact that they've had rain much of this past week, they're getting the rain from Ada now. That is pretty problematic for those really flood-prone areas of South Florida. So a concern as we head on into the next couple of days. But something to talk about is what we expect going into the later part of the forecast. So here are those infamous spaghetti models. I want to take you through the first part of it. So there's a variety of models that the National Hurricane Center uses in their forecast as guidance. That's what it is, guidance, not gospel. So the hurricane hunters go out there, they collect all this data from inside the storm, and then they give that to the National Hurricane Center. They put it in their supercomputer, quadrillions of math equations happening at once, and the output is all these colorful lines, all these models. So as we head on into the next couple of days, pretty good agreement. We've got the storm crossing over Cuba, emerging into the water again, crossing either over South Florida or at least over the Keys. So fair agreement here that we're going to see a turn towards the northwest heading into the next couple of days, at least through the rest of this weekend and into Monday. But this is where things get a bit hairy. Going into days 4 and 5 of the forecast, you can see there's a lot going on here. Storms, some of these models have the storm doing a little loop-de-loop, going off into left field, not really making much motion. Some of them have it moving into central Florida there. The official forecast track into day 5 does keep it off the coast of Tampa. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty here in the track. So we need to look into why that is. So for that, we look at what's going on in the upper atmosphere. And this is where we get to the part where I told you the blizzard happening out on the west coast kind of plays a role into what's going on. So we'll talk about that here. I'm showing you water vapor. This is what it sounds like, the water content in the upper part of the atmosphere. So this is looking from the top down at the atmosphere, at the surface. So the orange is drier air. The white, blue, and all those bright colors you see down at the bottom, that's moisture. It could be clouds, could be rain. The very bright color shows you an abundance of moisture, and that's what we're seeing with this storm right here. And I point to it. Let me get my pointer. We have a new system here, so having a little getting used to finding my tools, a little trouble finding my tools here. So my pointer is on the storm. That's Eta down there by Cuba. You can see a lot of those clouds moving off to the northeast. That's the upper level shear kind of blowing some of that off. That's good because it helps the storm breathe, so to speak, up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. But if I take you over here towards the west coast a little bit, I'm going to get out my handy dandy arrows here and kind of draw you what the upper atmosphere is doing. So you can kind of see a counterclockwise spin here. We got a trough of low pressure dipping into the west coast, thereabouts. That's a general weather pattern there. And so with that, we've got a bunch of cold air coming down into the northwest, low pressure, air is rising. So we're spelling out the recipe for a snowstorm here. And that's what a lot of these bright blue shades here are showing is moisture in the atmosphere from that. This is one element of the steering mechanism. We also have a ridge of high pressure over Florida. You can't really see it too well here in water vapor because it's a little too high from the feature that I'm trying to show you. We're at 300 millibars, which is pretty high up in the atmosphere. We want to look at the middle level of the atmosphere at 500 millibars. So this is all I can show you. But there is this ridge of high pressure that extends over the east coast, including Florida. And so that is the reason why Eta is going to tend towards this northwesterly turn going into the next couple of days. That, the models are in pretty good agreement, is going to happen around Monday, Tuesday-ish. But during that time frame, this trough of low pressure out here is on the move. So it's going to be inching towards the east. So as it does that, moves in, and this is a pretty powerful trough here. The jet stream is supporting it, so it is going to keep moving east and remain strong and beat up on that ridge of high pressure. That's normally what happens in the summer, but remember, this is November. We're in that transition season between summer going into winter eventually, so things get a little wonky here, and instead of beating up on the ridge, it kind of deforms it a little bit. So this storm is going to have some trouble trying to make its way up into the Gulf of Mexico. So at some point, it's going to be turning towards the northwest because of the high pressure, but this trough here is going to be pushing it off to the northeast. So what it seems like is going to happen, we notice this in the official track where it only remains a tropical storm because the upper atmosphere is about to get pretty chaotic into days 4 and 5 when this storm is over the Gulf of Mexico. There's some shear, and what will likely happen is that this storm will kind of reach a stopping point in the Gulf of Mexico and then get absorbed and dissipate, caught up in that upper current where the trough moves across the United States. So that's a lot of uncertainty. How exactly that happens is a very fine detail that the models are having a hard time working out now, because they aren't necessarily designed to be dealing with this kind of tropical system this late in the year. So it's two facets of meteorology trying to come together and help us work through this storm. That's the difficulty in this forecast. But what we do know is either way, no matter where exactly it goes along that cone, we're going to get quite a bit of rainfall here into South Florida and even into Central Florida, and that could extend all the way up throughout the state. So here's some of the rainfall totals that we expect through the next 72 hours here. And as I put this into motion, you can see a lot of that is going to be centered into areas south of Lake Okeechobee. 5 to 7 inches of rain in 72 hours. So that's quite a bit here. It's going to be a doozy for folks there. Into Central Florida, I would say between I-4 and maybe Lake O, 3 to 5 inches of rain. That's where we'll get that banding moving through. And depending on the position of the storm and how long it hangs on in the Gulf of Mexico before it kind of gets whisked into that larger upper level feature, the trough, 3 to 5 inches there. And then North Florida, spanning into southern Georgia and maybe some parts of southern Alabama, 1 to 2 inches. Maybe Jacksonville will be the northern extent of that heavy rainfall going into the later part of this 72-hour period. So as we head into late next week, approaching the next weekend, is where we'll see the bulk of that rain threat going into North Florida and South Georgia. So lucky it wasn't this weekend with the Georgia-Florida game going on, so that won't be interrupting that at all. But for our friends in South Florida, do prepare for a lot of rain. We have the potential for the folks within that tropical storm warning area, hurricane watch area, to be experiencing very gusty winds, very heavy downpours, and of course along the coastline, the sea will be beating up on the coastline there with 2 to 4 feet potential for storm surge. That's why we have the storm surge watch in effect. So that's the gist of what's going on with Ada. Damien, let's take it back to the app one more time so we can show folks the rain that's going on there. And also, what I'm going to do is turn on our hurricane layer so you can see the path overlaid one more time, our hurricane tracker, and see up close with that rainfall where we expect this thing to move. And again, notice how close together these points become as we head into the later part of the forecast, days 4 and 5. So it looks like the models are trying to tell us by that time frame, 4 to 5 days out, towards the end of this upcoming week, we could see this storm kind of slowing down by the time it gets to parallel with the southwest Florida coastline there around Venice, south of Bradenton. And really what this means is we're going to get a lot of heavy rainfall. Need to prepare for that if you're in this area. South Florida, if this thing, depending on whether it goes on land or not, regardless, it will make a very close approach going into Monday. So you need to make your preparations now as we head into Sunday. Really the last opportunity to safely make those preparations. If you got to tie down any loose things in your backyard or anything like that, now is the time to do that. If you live in a flood-prone area, think about some of those things that you want to keep away from the water and protect. Maybe your car and your parking is in a low area. You want to move your car, make plans for that. Now is the time to do that going into Sunday, because by Monday on the forecast track, late morning, early afternoon, this thing is right there on you and you're going to have to be dealing with that. So we'll continue to watch this forecast. Wanted to break down some of the uncertainty for you so you know what to expect as the forecast evolves. But for now, that's the latest we've got on Ada. We'll have more information coming out in your fast forecast tomorrow morning, and we'll be giving you some more live updates going on throughout the rest of this weekend. Okay, guys, have a safe evening, and we'll catch you back here soon.